Imagine this dear friend, a soft morning light spilling across your backyard, a mug of tea warming your hands, and the quiet rustle of leaves dancing to the rhythm of the breeze. The world feels still yet alive. You look around and think, what if I could make this little corner even more beautiful? But then the thought of cost creeps in: the fancy garden stores, the glossy magazines, the endless supplies that promise perfection. Here's the truth, and it's a gentle one. Beauty in a garden has never depended on money. It grows from imagination, care, and the stories of the things we choose not to throw away. I've met gardeners who built entire sanctuaries from what others called junk: an old teacup that became a bird's breakfast nook, a weathered pallet reborn as a wall of herbs. These small acts of reuse aren't just clever projects. They're love letters to the earth and to ourselves. They remind us that even as years pass and hands grow slower, creativity never fades. In fact, it deepens like soil enriched with time. So today, let's stroll together through ideas that ask for more heart than dollars. Take a deep breath, pour another cup, and step outside with me. We're about to discover how forgotten objects can bloom again, and how your garden, no matter its size, can reflect your own quiet, timeless magic. Picture this, dear friend, a quiet morning in your backyard. The air feels gentle, the kind that carries the soft hum of life waking up. You glance at your old china cabinet, that single porcelain teacup chipped along the rim, sitting lonely in the corner. Maybe it once held your morning tea when your children were still small, or maybe it came from your grandmother's kitchen. What if that memory could live again, not on a shelf, but beneath the open sky? Turning a teacup into a bird feeder is less about crafting and more about storytelling. Choose one that feels special to you, even if it's mismatched. Glue the teacup to its saucer slightly tilted so a tiny pool of seed can rest inside. When it's dry, tie a length of sturdy twine or an old necklace chain to the handle, then hang it from a tree branch or hook where birds love to visit. A light sprinkle of seed, a bit of morning patience, and soon your garden will flutter with song and motion. It's a simple gesture, really, but it carries quiet poetry. Each bird that visits brings life to what was once forgotten. The cup that once served you now gives back to the world. You'll find yourself waiting for those morning guests: robins, wrens, finches, each one a reminder that beauty doesn't always come from new things. Sometimes it lives in what we choose to keep, in the stories we refuse to let go. You know those old wooden pallets you often see leaning behind grocery stores or stacked by the roadside? Most people walk right past them, never realizing they're full of promise. But if you look closely at the grain of the wood, at the sturdy slats that once carried heavy loads, you'll see something more: a frame, a foundation, a second chance waiting to bloom. A wooden pallet can become a vertical garden, the perfect solution for those of us who don't have the space or the strength to dig wide beds anymore. Start with one that still feels solid. Give it a light sanding to smooth away splinters, but keep its weathered charm. Line the back with thick plastic or landscaping fabric, securing it with a few staples or tacks. Then, fill each horizontal pocket with good potting soil and tuck in herbs or flowers: basil for the kitchen, lavender for calm, or ivy for its gentle drape. I once helped a neighbor named Helen with hers. She lived in a small apartment with only a narrow balcony, but that single pallet turned her railing into a wall of green. Every morning she'd open her window, brush her fingers across the mint leaves, and breathe deeply. "It makes me feel like I'm still part of the earth," she told me one day, smiling. That's the beauty of this simple project. It gives nature back to those who thought they'd lost it. So if you find an old pallet leaning forgotten somewhere, don't just see wood. See potential, something humble that can stand tall again, just like us. There's a certain kind of magic that lives in the evening, that soft, hushed moment just before the sky turns blue and the stars begin to whisper awake. It's a time when the garden seems to exhale, trading sunlight for stillness. What if you could capture that twilight feeling and hold it glowing in your hands? All you need are a few old jars, mason jars, pickle jars, jelly jars, anything clear enough to let the light dance through. Clean them well, then place a small string of battery-powered fairy lights inside. Some people add a handful of pebble shells or pressed flowers to make each one personal. Close the lid gently and wrap wire or twine around the rim to create a handle. Hang your jars from tree branches along a porch rail or across a fence line. When dusk comes, turn on the lights and step back. The glow will shimmer like tiny fireflies, warm and flickering, bringing quiet joy to your evening. I remember visiting a friend who made these after her husband passed. She said, "They remind me that light doesn't disappear, it just changes form." Every night she'd sit under those glowing jars, soft music playing, and the garden would look alive again, as though time itself had slowed to breathe with her. That's the beauty of these jar lanterns. They cost almost nothing, but give back everything: comfort, calm, and a touch of wonder. With every twinkle, they remind us that even in our later seasons, there's still light waiting to shine. Do you remember those old wicker baskets we used to keep for picnics or knitting yarn? The ones too sturdy to throw away but too worn to use. Well, here's a little secret: they make beautiful plant stands once you simply flip them upside down. Yes, it's that easy. No sawing, no painting, no heavy lifting, just a twist of imagination. Set one on your porch, your patio, or beside your favorite chair in the garden. Place a potted plant right on top, maybe a geranium fern or trailing petunia. The woven texture adds instant warmth, turning an ordinary corner into a scene from an old countryside cottage. If you have several baskets in different sizes, stack or group them to create layers. The smallest can hold a single violet, the largest can cradle a lush fern. The height variation draws the eye and adds dimension like poetry written in plants. I once saw a woman at the flea market selling her old picnic baskets for $1 each. When I told her what I planned to do, she smiled wide and said, "Then they'll keep holding memories instead of dust." And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Every reused thing carries its own history, every bend in the wicker, every faded handle. In your garden, those old baskets get to live again, not as clutter, but as quiet witnesses to beauty reborn. So next time you see one tucked in the attic or sitting lonely at a thrift shop, turn it over and let it remind you that sometimes the simplest flips in life create the loveliest changes. At first glance, concrete blocks don't seem very charming. They're heavy gray and often overlooked, more likely to be found at a construction site than in a flower garden. But here's the quiet truth: some of the strongest things in life can also be the most beautiful when given a second purpose. Those plain blocks can build more than walls. They can build sanctuaries. Arrange them in a square or rectangle, stacking them as high as you'd like for a raised garden bed. Fill the center with rich soil, the kind that smells of rain and time. Then, notice the little hollows in each block, perfect spaces for extra life. Tuck in small succulents, trailing vines, or tiny marigolds. As the weeks pass, roots will find their home in those pockets, spilling over the edges like a green waterfall. I once visited a retired teacher who turned her entire side yard into a concrete block garden. Each block had a label: hope, kindness, patience. She told me, "When I built this, I realized I was building something inside myself too." That stayed with me. Sometimes structure doesn't restrict, it supports. These simple blocks, often free or left behind, become symbols of resilience, solid, dependable, and full of unexpected grace. So if you've ever doubted the beauty of something rough or ordinary, look again. A little soil, a few blooms, and an open heart can turn the unlovely into the unforgettable. That's the quiet magic of gardening, finding strength and softness in the same place. There are days when the summer sun feels heavier than our bones, and the thought of dragging a watering can around the yard just feels too much. But your garden doesn't have to suffer for it, nor do you. Sometimes the best inventions are born from quiet necessity. An old plastic bottle, when you'd normally toss in the recycling bin, can become a tiny helper that keeps your plants hydrated while you rest in the shade. Take a clean bottle and poke 2 or 3 small holes near the bottom. Bury it beside your plant, leaving the cap just above the soil. Fill it with water and let gravity do what it's always done best: provide slowly and steadily. The water seeps out drop by drop, feeding roots right where they need it. It's like giving your plants their own rhythm, a heartbeat that continues even when you're not there. I learned this trick from my friend Robert, who spends his summers traveling to see his grandchildren. I used to come home to wilted leaves and dry soil, he told me, laughing. Now they're greener than when I left. He called it the lazy gardener's miracle, but I call it kindness in a bottle, because that's what it is, a way of caring that doesn't strain or rush, but trusts time and patience to do their part. This little trick costs nothing, saves water, and grants peace of mind. It's a reminder that the best gardens grow not just from effort, but from clever care, the kind that lets you rest while your garden quietly thrives beside you. If you've ever spent a morning in the garden wondering whether that little green sprout is basil or mint, you'll understand why garden labels matter. But instead of flimsy plastic tags that fade in the sun, imagine something sturdier, more personal rocks that tell stories. Each one painted with care, each one a small piece of art that lives among your plants. Find smooth flat stones from your yard, the park, or even the edge of a riverbank. Rinse them clean and let them dry under the sun. Then comes the fun part. Bring out your paints or markers. Write the names of your plants, maybe rosemary, thyme, or lavender, and add a small drawing beside each word, a leaf, a bee, or a simple swirl of color. When you're done, seal your artwork with a coat of clear varnish to protect it from rain. I once helped a grandmother named June paint her first set of garden stones. Her granddaughter, a little girl with freckles and bright curiosity, painted hearts and suns instead of plant names. June laughed and decided to place them anyway, saying they may not label the plants, but they label the love. Weeks later, those stones still gleamed among the flowers, carrying not just words, but joy. That's the beauty of this project. It's easy light on the hands and full of personality. Each stone becomes a signature, a moment of your story nestled in the soil. Because gardens aren't just about growing things, they're about remembering who we are, one painted rock at a time. We all have that one old chair, the one that's missing a leg cracked across the seat, or gathering dust in the corner of the shed. It's too worn to sit on, but too familiar to throw away. Here's a secret, dear friend: the chair still has a purpose. All it needs is a little imagination and a few blooms to bring it back to life. Start by removing the broken seat, leaving a sturdy frame. Place a pot or basket right in that open space, or line it with landscaping fabric and fill it with soil. Then, plant bright, cheerful flowers, petunias, begonias, or creeping vines that will tumble down the sides like fabric made of petals. The backrest, once supporting tired shoulders, now becomes a trellis of sorts, a place where nature leans and climbs. I once met a retired florist named Carol, who lined her front porch with 6 old chairs, each painted a different pastel color. She called them her company, smiling as the flowers bloomed from every seat. I may not host many visitors these days, she said, but these guests never leave me lonely. Every passerby slowed down to admire them, not because they were perfect, but because they were alive with character. That's the power of a broken chair turned planter. It teaches us something deeper, that even when something loses its original use, it can still serve beauty, still make someone smile. Sometimes all a forgotten thing or a forgotten person needs is a little sunlight and a second chance to bloom again. If you've ever shared a quiet evening with friends clinking glasses under soft light, you know that empty bottles often carry memories. Instead of tossing them in the bin, why not let those memories live on, catching the sunlight by day and glimmering under the moon? Wine bottles once filled with laughter and conversation can become the most enchanting borders that your garden has ever seen. Rinse them clean, remove the labels if you like, and bury them. Neck first along the edges of a flower bed or pathway. Use bottles of different colors, deep green, ocean blue, amber gold, to create a mosaic of glass that catches light from every angle. When the sun rises, they'll glow softly like jewels set in the earth. When evening falls, they'll hold on to that light just a little longer, shimmering in the dusk. A friend of mine, Jack, began doing this after his 50th wedding anniversary. Each bottle he used marked a celebration, one from a family dinner, one from a Christmas toast, one from his late wife's birthday. He said, "I walk through the garden, and it feels like walking through our memories." Those borders became a story, not just a decoration. That's the quiet power of reuse, giving old things away to keep speaking even without words. With nothing more than a shovel and a few bottles, you can edge your garden with light and remembrance. It's a small project, yes, but one that proves beauty doesn't need to be bought, it only needs to be remembered. Picture this: an old clawfoot bathtub, once the keeper of warm bubbles in quiet evenings, now sitting in your garden surrounded by grass and wildflowers. Instead of being discarded, it becomes something new, a peaceful pond, a sanctuary for birds, frogs, and soft reflections of sky. You don't need a sprawling yard or professional tools, you just need imagination and the willingness to see beauty in what once seemed finished. Begin by cleaning the tub and sealing any cracks. Set it in a spot that catches a bit of sunlight, but still offers shade in the afternoon. Fill it with fresh water, a few smooth stones, and floating plants, maybe lilies, water hyacinth, or even a handful of duckweed. You can place a small solar fountain inside if you like the sound of gentle trickling water. In time, dragonflies will find it, birds will visit for a drink, and you'll find yourself drawn there too for the calm it offers. I remember visiting an elderly couple in the countryside who built one together. They had painted their bathtub a soft sky blue, ringed it with wildflowers, and set an old mirror behind it to reflect the shimmer of water. The husband smiled and said, "We can't travel much anymore, so we brought a bit of paradise home." That's what a garden pond does. It slows the world down. Every ripple, every reflection feels like a conversation between nature and memory. And in that stillness, you realize peace doesn't come from going somewhere new. It comes from finding new meaning where you already are. Sometimes the most delightful ideas begin in the kitchen. That old metal colander you've used for decades, the one that's a little dented, a little discolored, is already halfway to becoming a beautiful hanging planter. The holes that once drained pasta now make the perfect drainage for plants. It's as if it's been waiting all along to hold something living. To begin, give your colander a quick rinse, and if you'd like a coat of spray paint in a cheerful color, maybe sage green ivory or sunflower yellow. Line the bottom with a bit of moss or a coffee filter to keep the soil in place. Then fill it with a lightweight potting mix and choose plants that trail or bloom freely: petunias, ivy, strawberries, or sweet alyssum. Add a sturdy chain or rope through the handles and hang it from a branch pergola or porch hook. When the breeze passes through, your colander sways gently, scattering a faint scent of flowers through the air. I once saw a woman at a farmer's market selling hanging colanders filled with herbs. She said, "I call them my garden bowls. Everything good rises from them." There was something poetic about that, turning an ordinary kitchen tool into a cradle for life. Every time you walk past yours, you'll smile at how something so simple can be so lovely. A reminder that creativity isn't about buying more. It's about seeing more, the beauty that's been hiding in plain sight right under your nose, maybe in the back of your cupboard all along. Every gardener knows that feeling: a beloved old pot that's chipped, faded, or just plain dull. You don't want to throw it away, but it doesn't quite match the joy of the flowers it holds anymore. Here's a quick, joyful trick that costs almost nothing and brings instant cheer. Wrap it up like a present. Yes, gift wrap your pots. Choose wrapping paper that makes you smile. Maybe it's floral, maybe it's a soft pastel, or maybe it's something bold that reminds you of spring dresses from years gone by. Cut a piece to fit around your pot, secure it with clear tape or glue, and then cover the outside with clear plastic wrap or a waterproof sealant to protect it from moisture. In minutes, your plain old container transforms into something playful and bright, a pop of color that livens up your patio or windowsill. You can even use leftover wallpaper, fabric scraps, or pages from old magazines for different textures and styles. Once a viewer from Oregon wrote to me saying she wrapped her pots in her late husband's old plaid shirts. Now she said it feels like he's still in the garden with me. That's the real gift, not the paper, but the sentiment behind it. This idea isn't about perfection. It's about the joy of giving something ordinary a moment to shine. When you see those splashes of color across your garden, you'll realize beauty doesn't always grow from the ground. Sometimes it comes from the heart and a roll of forgotten paper waiting to bring a little happiness back into bloom. If you've ever come across an old dresser, missing its knobs, or Standing uneven on one leg, don't rush to throw it out just yet. Those drawers, once filled with sweaters and socks, can find new purpose beneath the open sky. There's something deeply satisfying about taking something that once stored memories and turning it into a vessel for new life. Start by pulling the drawers out completely. Line the inside with thick plastic or a scrap of landscaping fabric to keep the wood from rotting. Add potting soil, then plant flowers or herbs that match your heart, cheerful marigolds, cascading ivy, or fragrant mint. If you have multiple drawers, try stacking them slightly askew for a layered effect like a tower of blooms leaning gently toward the sun. Paint the wood if you wish soft white for a cottage feel or turquoise for a pop of joy. I remember visiting a woman named Lila who had filled her old vanity drawers with succulents and tiny fairy statues. She said, "It reminds me that even when life loses its structure, something beautiful can still grow from what remains." Her garden corner looked like a storybook, a mix of history and hope, all planted in old wood. That's what drawer planters do. They give you a way to hold on and let go at the same time. The past becomes part of the present, the ordinary becomes whimsical, and the space you thought was gone becomes full again, full of roots petals and peace. At first glance, an old tire doesn't seem like the stuff of beauty. It's heavy black and often tossed aside, forgotten in alleys or junkyards. But give it a bit of color, a touch of imagination, and suddenly it becomes a joyful ring of life, a flower bed that bursts with character and charm. Start by washing the tire and letting it dry in the sun. Then, choose your paint bold yellow, coral pink, sky blue, or a soft mint green. A single coat can transform its entire personality. Once dry, fill the center with soil, add a few bright flowers, zinnias, pansies, or even cascading petunias, and watch the transformation. You can place a tire flat on the ground, lean it against a wall, or even stack 2 or 3 to create a tiered garden of color. I once met an elderly gentleman named Tom who lined the edge of his driveway with painted tires. Each one was a different hue, and inside each he planted blooms that matched his grandchildren's favorite colors. They come running to find their flower every time they visit, he said, eyes gleaming. It keeps them and me smiling. There's something wonderful about giving new life to something once thought useless. These tire flower beds remind us that beauty can rise from anywhere, even from rubber and dust. And maybe that's the heart of gardening itself, seeing not what something is, but what it could become with a little love and color. There's something poetic about old windows, the way they once opened to let in sunlight, laughter, and a breath of fresh air. Even after they've lost their glass or their hinges creak, they still seem to hold stories. Instead of letting them fade away in a garage or landfill, give those frames a new view, one filled with leaves, blossoms, and the gentle rhythm of growth. To make a window frame trellis, start by brushing off the dust and giving it a quick sanding. You can leave it rustic for a vintage look or paint it a soft cream robin's egg blue or moss green. Lean it against a fence or mount it securely into the soil. Then plant something that loves to climb sweet peas, clematis, or morning glories. As the vines weave through the panes, they'll turn that empty frame into a living portrait, one that changes with the seasons. I once visited a retired art teacher named Marianne, who had an entire row of old window frames standing like sentinels in her garden. Each one was wrapped in a different plant, one with ivy, another with scarlet runner beans. She called them her living paintings. She smiled and said, "When you get older, you start to realize beauty isn't about new things. It's about seeing the old ones in a new light." And she's right. These frames remind us that the past doesn't need to be erased to make room for growth. It can become part of the structure that helps new things rise, bloom, and reach toward the sun. Sometimes a garden needs a little mischief, a wink of humor hiding between the flowers. That's where sock gnomes come in. Those old socks at the back of your drawer, the ones that have lost their pair or grown too thin for comfort, can become cheerful little guardians watching over your blooms. They may not keep pests away, but they'll surely keep your spirit light. To make them, gather your old socks, a handful of rice or beans for filling, and a few fabric scraps or buttons. Stuff the sock to form a soft, round body, then tie off sections for arms or legs if you wish. Add a bit of fabric or felt for a hat and a touch of yarn for a beard. A dab of paint or marker can bring out eyes and a rosy nose. Once finished, tuck your gnome under a fern beside a flower pot or peeking out from a garden corner. A viewer once told me she made a family of sock gnomes with her grandkids one rainy afternoon. Each child named theirs Mr. Sprout Daisy Hat and Captain Compost. When the sun came out, they placed them around the garden like a welcoming committee. Weeks later, she said, "Every time I see them, I remember that laughter grows just as easily as flowers." That's the secret of these little gnomes. They're not just decorations, they're reminders. Life doesn't have to be perfect to be delightful. Sometimes the odd socks, like the odd days, end up creating the sweetest smiles of all. When space is small or bending low has become a little harder, the trick is to think vertically. And what better way than with something you already have, an old rain gutter? It may have once carried storms away from your roof, but now it can help life flow in a new direction. A hanging garden that climbs instead of spreads. Start by finding a section of gutter in decent shape, even if it's a bit worn or faded. Give it a quick cleaning, then cap the ends or seal them with recycled materials like bottle caps or cut wood pieces. Drill small drainage holes along the bottom. Mount the gutter horizontally on a fence wall or railing. Fill it with a lightweight potting mix and plant shallow-rooted greens or flower strawberries, lettuce pansies, or even creeping thyme. The slim design keeps it manageable and watering is easy. A light pour across the top and the rest takes care of itself. I once met a widow named Elaine who had only a narrow patio to work with. She lined her back fence with 3 levels of gutters painted pale yellow. By midsummer, it looked like a waterfall of green herbs spilling over bees buzzing gently. She said, "It feels like the garden is finally hugging me back." That's what this simple idea offers: beauty without strain, abundance without clutter. Gutter gardens remind us that even when space feels limited, life still finds ways to climb, bloom, and reach upward. It's proof that growth isn't always about expanding. Sometimes it's about rising gently in the space you already have. There's something timeless about the sound of water in a garden. It soothes the mind, slows the heart, and makes even the smallest backyard feel like a sanctuary. You don't need marble statues or expensive pumps to create that calm. Just a few old buckets, a little patience, and the magic of movement. Gather 3 or 4 metal or plastic buckets in different sizes. Even paint pails or mop buckets will do. Drill a small hole near the bottom of each one, except the last. Stack them from largest to smallest, slightly off-center, so the water can flow down through each layer. Hide a small solar or electric pump in the bottom bucket to keep the water circulating gently. Add stone shells or pebbles for texture and paint the outside of each bucket in soft garden tones, sage cream or sky blue. When the water starts to trickle, close your eyes for a moment and just listen. It's like your garden's own quiet heartbeat. A neighbor of mine, Ruth, made one of these after a long illness kept her mostly at home. "The sound makes me feel like the world hasn't stopped," she told me. Every morning she'd sip her coffee while the buckets whispered softly beside her chair. The rhythm brought her peace, not grand, not loud, but steady and sure. That's what a fountain like this offers: not spectacle, but serenity. It reminds us that beauty can flow even through the simplest things, and that sometimes what we most need isn't noise or color, but the quiet sound of water reminding us that life keeps moving, drop by gentle drop. Sometimes all a garden needs is a little trick of light to feel twice as big. A mirror placed just right can do that, not only reflecting what's there, but revealing what could be. It's an idea both simple and surprisingly powerful, turning an old mirror into a window of endless green. Find a mirror with a frame that speaks to you, maybe a weathered wooden one from a yard sale, or an ornate frame that's lost its shine. Clean it gently, and if you'd like, give it a coat of outdoor paint to protect against rain. Then, place it behind plants or against a fence where it can catch the light and double your blooms. When sunlight filters through the leaves and bounces back from the glass, it creates the illusion of depth, a garden that seems to stretch beyond its borders. I once visited a small townhouse garden that used this trick beautifully. The owner, a retired librarian, had placed 3 mirrors at angles along her back wall. In the reflection, her few flower pots looked like an entire meadow. "It's not just about seeing more," she said softly. "It's about feeling there's more to see." That's the quiet wisdom of a mirror in the garden. It's not just about space, it's about spirit. A reflection reminds us that what's around us can feel endless if we only shift how we see it. And perhaps as we grow older, that's the lesson gardens keep teaching, that beauty, like life, is often much larger than it appears. Every home seems to have a broken clock that no longer ticks its hands, forever frozen in place. It may no longer count the hours, but what if it could mark something else? Instead, growth, renewal, and the quiet patience of nature. Turning an old clock frame into a succulent wall is a small act of resurrection, where time stands still, but life goes on. Begin by removing the glass and clock mechanisms, leaving only the circular frame. Line the back with mesh or sturdy plastic to hold soil in place. Fill it with a bit of cactus mix, then gently press in small succulents, echeveria, hens and chicks, or trailing string of pearls. You can hang it on a fence or prop it against a wall where it catches the morning light. The succulents will slowly spread, filling the clock face with texture and color like a living mosaic of time. I remember visiting a craft fair where an older gentleman sold these creations. He told me he began making them after retiring from his job repairing watches. "I spent a lifetime fixing time," he said, "but now I just let it grow." There was something beautiful in that surrender, the acceptance that time isn't lost, it's transformed. Each succulent clock becomes a little meditation on patience, a gentle reminder that we don't stop growing just because the world moves slower. Even in stillness, life keeps unfolding. And perhaps that's the truest measure of time, not in seconds or minutes, but in the blooms we nurture and the peace we allow ourselves to feel. And so, dear friend, we come to the end of our gentle walk through the garden, 20 small wonders, each one born not from wealth but from heart. From teacups that sing to the birds, to clocks reborn with succulents, these ideas remind us that beauty is never dependent on what we buy, but on what we notice, cherish, and reuse. Every chipped plate, every worn chair, every quiet moment in the yard holds the power to bloom again when touched by care. Gardening isn't really about plants, is it? It's about hope. It's about proving again and again that new life can rise from what was forgotten. Every reused item, every drop of water saved, every moment you spend nurturing instead of discarding it, all adds up to something far greater than decoration. It becomes a reflection of who you are, resilient, creative, and still blooming with grace. I once met a woman who said her garden taught her more about aging than any book ever could. When I deadhead a flower, she said, "I'm reminded that endings make room for beginnings." I think that's true for us too. Each passing season invites us not to retreat, but to reimagine, to reuse what we have, to celebrate what still grows strong. So as you sit with your cup of tea and look out at your garden, remember this: your hands still create beauty. Your imagination is still fertile ground. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Which of these ideas sparked something in you today? I'd love to hear. Until next time, may your days be peaceful, your garden abundant, and your heart forever in bloom.